sending their energy through that, investing their energy in it so it can become illuminate. We create this relationship structure. Our unique energy complex as a male, Afurakanu man, the unique energy complex of an Afuraitkiatnut woman. We come together and blend those together. Now we've created an entity, a relationship. Then we invest our unique energy complexes into that relationship to give it life and vitality. That's on the Ra and Rait side. Now, then we talk about, with Khepera, bringing something into being. So Khepera, or Kheper, to be, to exist, to have being, to subsist, come into being, to happen, to fashion. Our behaviors, our interactions, our quote unquote emotions. You can look at an emotion akin to, something sprouting. And we talk about this in our cosmogram, but when you interact with somebody, you have some experience. When you experience somebody or something, then that experience goes into your eyes, fills up your being and so forth. You've just had a connection or a conception. If you see somebody, hear something, feel something, experience something, that's a conception, like a seed being planted in the ground. Something just got planted into your awareness. Then it goes deep within you and begins to germinate within you, just like a seed breaks and germinates and the roots go down. You have some experience, you just experienced something like somebody getting shot or something else happening. You just got seeded with an experience. Then it starts working itself in you and starts germinating and make you, you begin to have some association with that experience. And it touches on certain things within your memory or in your spirit and your krawa and so forth. And then what emerges after it roots itself in you and touches certain things in you, then you have a response. And that first response is an emotional response. Mentally, you assess what happens, and then you have emotional response. You attach some energy to it, whether it makes you glad or angered, fired up. You have a watery response or a fiery response or earthy response or whatever it is. That emergence of a response is akin to some, after things root, then the first sprouts break through the surface of the ground. So people on the outside, when they see something break through the surface of the ground, something emerge out of nothing. First you have black soil that was flat, and all of a sudden something broke through and sprung up and began to sprout. That's akin to the sun springing up at sunrise or at the spring equinox, breaking through the surface, and then a sprouting occurs. That's akin to what was seeded in your consciousness, rooted in your consciousness, germinating and rooting. And then when you have an emotional reaction, that's a manifestation of what was deep down within you. Now, that's the first thing that comes out. And then you may have words that reflect that, emotional reaction. Or you may engage in physical, activities that reflect what's going on inside you emotionally. What happens mentally, most people can't see, but the emotional reaction is the first manifestation of what was going on mentally. And then the physical act, when you carry out what your emotions are dictating, that energetic force is dictating, then that's the physical manifestation of that. But Kheper, meaning to be, to exist, to have being, to subsist, to come into being, to happen, to fashion, to form, to create. As Afurakanu men, Afuraitkiatnut women in relationships, when we forge this thing or fuse this thing or create this entity, this relationship, which is a living entity, and we invest our manhood energy, womanhood energy into this entity we just created, then to make things happen within this entity, Kheper, make things happen, to fashion, to form, to create, to bring things into being. That's the Kheper side. And then when you look, remember we said that the T is the feminine aspect. So the Kheperit are beings or things that exist, events, occurrences, things who create things that are, and so forth. Kheperit, what is, what exists, things that are. So the active aspect, bringing something into being, and then once it's brought into being, it's concretized into, it's coming into being, and now it is formed into being. expansion and contraction, Kheper, Kheperit. So we're bringing things into being. We've already created this relationship. We've invested our energy into this relationship. Now that we're investing our energy in this relationship and we're invoking Khepera and Kheperit, now we're starting to bring things into being, making, fashioning, forming thoughts, ideas that are in relationship to everything we need to do individually as well as a couple. We bring children into the world, fashioning a home, bringing a home into being, bringing an educational system into being, the proper health. How are we going to deal with health individually as well as, you know, the children? What kind of foods you're putting in your body physically? What kind of quote unquote medicines are you putting in your body if you have some kind of issue? What kind of thoughts are you putting in your mind constantly? Are you constantly, you know, bringing into being self-destructive or lustful thoughts, watching reality TV or, you know, basketball wives, some nonsense like that? If you're constantly feeding disorder into your mindset, bringing that into being, or are you bringing into being things that are harmonious and orderly that you're feeding on? So anything you're making, fashioning, building, creating, bringing into being out of nothing and concretizing that, that's the realm of Khepera and Kheperit. When we align with them ritually, then we're bringing into being things that are going to help us individually, as a couple, as a family with the children, as an Oman, as a nation. We're constantly focused on everything that we engage in. What are we bringing into being? Is Khepera really participating in this? Is Kheperit really participating in this? If it's not in harmony with order, they're not participating. If you're fashioning an entrepreneurial endeavor, bringing that into being, if you're fashioning a ritual process or not a school of thought, but a approach to ritual practice that you're going to engage in and that your spouse is going to engage in and your children are going to engage in, and those who are connected to you in the community are going to engage in, are you bringing things into being that are in harmony with order? Are you bringing things into being that are perpetuating disorder? Are you bringing things into being that have to do behaviorally with things that you're conditioned about? Or are you bringing things into being behaviorally based on divine order? Are you eradicating self-destructive conditionings instead of identifying these conditionings with, oh, this is just who I am. That's who I am. This is who I am. This is how I've grown up. And taking that as part of your innate personality. Your innate personality is the Kra that governs you, the divinity, the Ba, the divine living spirit, and your Sum Sum in relationship to the Ka and the Ba, the Kra and the Ba. But if you take conditionings on as, you know, brainwash conditionings on as that's my natal personality, that's just who I am, then anytime you have a conflict, you don't give yourself the room to overcome that because you're identifying yourself with conditioned or programmed behavior. So what are you bringing into being? When we're talking about twin flame relationships and the role of Khepera and Kheperit, it's mentally, what are you bringing into being? Physically, what are you bringing into being? Community, what are you bringing into being? Khepera, Kheperit, what are you bringing out? Now, if we look back at the dung beetle, gives it even more, you know, insight into that. Let's go back to the book. Now, we talked about the dung beetle and what the dung beetle does. But if we look at it from a cultural relationship standpoint, gives some more insight. Getting back to page 27. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why we utilize these animal totems. First and foremost, they carry the energy of the divinity, so they are who they are. We don't just use animal totems as symbols just because they're cute symbols. They carry the specific energy of a specific divinity that we are trying to align with. Just like a battery, if you have a C battery or a D battery or a AA battery or a AAA and so forth, depending on their size, their form, they carry certain energy potency. And you can release that energy when you put them in a device. every one of these animals, just like every plant, every mineral and so forth, they're like different sizes and kinds of batteries. And they carry the energy of a specific divinity based on their form. When we invoke that divinity through the agency of that animal totem, we can release the energy in that battery. There's a Khepera battery, a Kheperit battery, a Ra battery, a Rait battery. Each one of these animals are batteries for, and so are we. So we are children of specific divinities. So when we come in contact with somebody and they feel our energy, if you're a child of Heteru, you end up emitting her energy and affecting people with Heteru energy because you're a child of Heteru, Afia, and so forth. And people are recalibrated when they come in your presence. If you're a child of Ra or Awusi or Ajwa, you are a battery for that divinity. You affect your spouse and you affect your children and other people, but you also affect, our people in the community. They come in contact with you, they feel that cool magnetic energy, and it affects their spirit body, and they can, readjust themselves if they're out of order. They can learn more about the divinity just by interacting with you, and learn more about the deity that governs your head just by interacting with you when you're operating in an authentic fashion. So, but we utilize these animal totems first and foremost because they carry the energy of the deity. No matter what we believe, it is what it is. Fiery animals like lions and, leopards and so forth, they project that fiery kind of energy. Whether you analyze it or not, is being projected, just like the sun is projecting solar energy. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Hot energy is coming from that aura, and it's going to affect you in a certain way. Certain kinds of energy complexes are coming from these different animals, plants, minerals, and so forth. So that's first and foremost the reason, but then secondly, it also allows us, if we investigate, it gives us insight in how to execute our function in the world because they live in harmony with order. Animals are not making all kinds of silly decisions. They're living in harmony with the nature in which they were created. And since they are also shrines of divinities or batteries of divinities, we can watch them move and operate, and we can see how things should be operating on an energetic level or energic level, and we can recalibrate ourselves. So, to prove that after the dung beetle drives the dung ball across the landscape, the ball is buried. The male and female then go underground and mate. The female lays her egg in the ball of dung. The ball thus carries the new life that will ultimately spring forth from the ball. So, if the dung beetle pushes the ball of dung across the landscape and the ball is buried, the male and female go underground and mate. So the Afurakanu man, Afuraitkiatnut woman, there's this ball that's created, there's this entity that's created. They're the balance of male and female, Khepera, Kheperit, and so forth. They've created an entity, this kind of relationship, this draw. Then it's buried. Then they go underground to mate after it's buried, because it's buried in the sense of a seed being planted. So not buried in the sense, but it is burial, but it's also seeding, it's planting. So we seed this relationship that we've fashioned. We seed this relationship, we put it underground, in the ground, just like you seed for a plant. And then the man and woman go underground to mate. Now, in this instance, we're not talking about going underground to mate or going in the dark to mate, but going underground, going under to mate, to fuse, meaning going into ritual invocation, establishing shrines and so forth, engaging in ritual practice together, going underground, meaning going into the spirit realm, going under, male and female to mate or to fuse. You fashion this relationship, now you want to go into the spirit realm to fuse together or mate, so you can balance one another out. It's the whites and offspring talking about equally yoked in the Bible and all of that, that comes directly from our culture. You're not going to connect in a balanced fashion when one person is involved in ancestral religion, and one person is trying to embrace Christianity or Islam or Judaism or some self-destructive, nonsensical thing. If you do that, then you're compromising reality. Now, some people do that, and they'll just suppress, certain things about themselves because they don't want to create conflict. But that's still disorder. If one person is suppressing something and the other person isn't, it's imbalance. They can pretend like it's not imbalanced. A lot of people have imbalanced relationships and they're married for 30, 40 years. But that's not our goal. Our goal is not to just do anything we can do to stay with somebody, even though it's an imbalanced situation for years. Some people smoke cigarettes for 30 years. Just because they did it for 30 years doesn't mean it's harmonious. At the end of the 30 years, they develop cancer and die. But if they say, well, I've been doing it for 30 years, so it must be okay. I've been married for 30 years, so we must be working. That doesn't mean it's working just because you're doing it. Doesn't mean it's working just because you're, been able to smoke for 30 years. So if we're being authentic, yeah, we're equally yoked, we're both, there's a balance of male and female, complementary opposites fused together. If you're not engaged in the same ritual practice, then it's going to manifest as a problem somewhere. So, but when we say go underground and mate, after you planted the seed or the ball and so forth, we go underground to fuse ritually. We engage in ancestral religious practice. The man goes to his ancestral shrine and deals with his Kra and Ba. The female goes to her ancestral shrine, also dealing with her Kra and Ba'at. But then there's ritual that they do together as Khepera and Kheperit. That's that, quote unquote, mating. The ball thus carries the new life that will ultimately spring forth from the ball. So when you come from underground after you finish mating, you fuse together ritually. Now, when you come forward, you're a balanced, you have a balanced disposition as a couple. And you put yourself in position to, anytime any kind of obstacles come forward, your Khepera and Kheperit, you can bring things into being. You can bring things out of, or make things manifest out of no thing or nothing. You can go deep underground, just like the seed germinating and putting the roots down. You can go deep underground, get what you need to get from the deep nutrients of the soil and so forth, and then you can emerge, bring something into being out of nothing. You can bring the answer or the solution or rectify something when you come into contact with certain obstacles. And sometimes there's no precedent for how to deal with this particular issue because it's never come up before. You have to be able to go inside ritually, utilizing your insight, that uchat, the third eye and so forth. But you need to go into that insight to be able to go deep down within where you buried that ball, where the fertilization took place, and then you can emerge and bring something into being out of nothing. You can bring an answer to this problem into being out of nothing, even though nobody gave you the answer. But you can access it because you're so used to going underground and mating. You're so used to pushing that ball and burying it, going underground, mating, and placing your, eggs in the ball so it can be birthed later. And, the children can be birthed later, the offspring can be birthed later. You're so used to doing that on a regular basis. When you come in contact with, problems, you know how to go in, mate, fuse, get what you need to get deep within the darkness and bring the solution out of nothing. And the way we're able to do that is we're pouring libation, invoking Khepera, invoking Kheperit, deliberately, directly, consciously in our ritual practice and so forth. The more we invoke them by name, we attune ourselves to their energy so when it's needed, it's there. It's just like when you eat certain foods and so forth and you have vitamins, minerals, and everything else. Some of those vitamins and minerals manifest their, utility in certain situations. Like if you're engaged in strenuous work and so forth, you need water, you need iron. If someone's iron has low iron, they become anemic and become weak and so forth. So when you're engaged in strenuous work, that's when it begins to, manifest as far as were you getting enough iron? Because if you're not, you become very weak very quickly. So it's the same thing with invoking the divinities. You invoke a number of divinities by name and so forth. It may not be every moment of every day a situation arises that all of the divinities' energy is focused on that. There are certain divinities that govern certain things. So you're constantly invoking them on a regular basis, consistently. So when something arises that their energy does govern, you're already positioned to be in alignment with it and invoke them for the kind of response that you need to have to overcome that obstacle, because you're so used to going in.